Okay. Hi. Thank you guys so much for joining on another episode of the Logos Podcast. We have a special guest today. I would like to give her an intro and give you guys a rundown of what we're going to be talking about. So, thank you, of course, always for joining us. Addie Barrage
Yes.
Matthew here with us today. She's a social worker turned minister who works with her husband, who is a spiritual beast, I might say, to lead a college ministry right in the Washington, D.C. area.
hmm
Um, we just recently met, but just from my own observations, Patty is a great example of someone proactively battling the lies that manifest in the lives of many. I think she really leads with humility and vulnerability and strength. And that's really been influential in just taking captive the thoughts we have about our bodies, diet, and health in general. So, welcome, Patty.
Thank you. I was not expecting to be gassed up like this, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
You're like, I just met you.
I
But
know,
no,
right? I'm like, oh, this is nice.
oh no, yeah, so great to have you. I think our listeners, we're on this journey where we have this topic called soul. So we're doing topics that, just as souls, as humans, like that we talk about things that affect us, like
Mhm.
negatively or positively. And so I just really believe like what you've been talking about and Patty has a Jesus 8-2 ministry. What you've been talking about, Patty, I think is really going to be helpful. So I'm excited.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Why don't you just start about just tell us a little bit about you. Kind of give us, you actually introduced me to this lingo. For me, a relationship with your body is like a new concept for me. So
Mhm.
thanks to you, like I've been really, thinking about it. But tell us a little bit about your relationship with your body and how it led you ultimately to start Jesus 8-2.
Yeah. So I am Canadian, actually, from the east coast of Canada, so the exotic land of across the border, and moved here in 2017. But I feel really grateful for the ways that God has opened my eyes to this topic because I think I've struggled with what you even said in terms of having a relationship with my body for most of my life, but I think only became aware of it in the last couple of years. And so I just feel really grateful to be able to reflect and share. But yeah, I think, if I can remember the first time that I had awareness of like a negative sense of self, I think it started like in elementary school, probably around the fourth grade, and just being very acutely aware of what people thought of me and what people perceived of my physical body. And I've had a lot of health issues. When I was in elementary school, middle school, I was underweight for a variety of different reasons and for health things that I only discovered later. And so I remember feeling like I was secure in the type body wise that I was because I was really skinny. And that seemed to be the
Mm.
body type that was desired. But I also remember in the sixth grade, this is a story that I feel like has stuck with me since, but I was talking to this guy in my class, and basically he made a reference to bones are for dogs, basically meaning that, like, who would want my body, basically. And
Yeah.
remembering that I felt so confused because I was like, I thought I looked the way that I meant to. I thought this is like how I should look. And then later, as my health improved, I gained weight in a way that, was reflective of my health increasing. And so that was good. But I think created a fear around what that meant. Again, I realized that a lot of my perceptions of self had everything to do with what people saw or what people thought, and wondering how I'll be received then. And I think probably the worst it got was in college. I think in part because I had a lot more control over what I ate, a lot more control over my movement, how I worked out, and remember even that I would eat salads every day. And I think in hopes that that would help me lose weight. I had so much fear around food. I remember having like most days debates with myself of how much to eat. If I ate this amount, I probably gain weight, but if I don't eat that amount, I'll be hungry for the rest of the day. And just living in so much fear around what I looked like and trying to find ways to control that. And in the gym, that would look like going to the gym, hoping to change my body with how I moved, feeling like I needed to punish myself for what I ate. Like if I felt like I ate too much, like sugar or too much like treats or whatever, and found myself like restricting so much to where I'd like binge a lot, I'd overeat, and then I'd undereat. And I think to me, the problem was exposed at its peak because again, I would normalize a lot of my behaviors. And I think a lot of people in my life wouldn't have even known that I had a problem actually until I got married. And once I got married, I remember hearing the way that Noah would react to how I spoke to myself. And he was just like, that's not okay. Like, it's not okay for you to like talk to yourself that way. It's not okay for you to have this much fear. And that being, I think, a point where I realized I needed help. And so I think even thinking about G's 8-2, part of the birth of G's 8-2 was the start of me getting help. And I'm honestly feel like I'm so grateful for the people in my life who've helped me learn, more about my relationship with my body, because I don't think I even had awareness of just how bad it was. So that's a little like Reader's Digest version of my journey up until this point.
Yeah, yeah. I even noticed like as you talk, you reference like the way you view your body and just even the thoughts that come in and how others can kind of dictate how you perceive your body. Um, I think that's so crucial in understanding this. I just wanted you to expand like on just what body image is. I think that'll be a good, start for the rest of our conversation because I think it like really influences how we talk about this. So, yeah, how
Totally.
would you describe it? And
So I guess like well, because I looked up the definition because I was like, I'm curious actually how like the dictionary defines it, but it defines it as the subjective picture or mental image of one's own body. And it's interesting because whenever I talk to people about body image, I feel like it often feels very insular, where it's like trying to control your own perception of self in a way that's really difficult. Because even what I think this definition lacks is the recognition that it has everything to do with what people think. You know, um, again, like even thinking about a very common situation, right? Where you can get dressed, you're feeling yourself, you're like, my fit looks great, like I look awesome today, I'm loving whatever. And then you go, to a hangout or with friends, and you're hoping to get that like recognition or those compliments and don't, and you feel like deflated, where you're just like, wow, do I actually look as good as I think? Or even seeing other people who you think look better than you, and you're just like, dang, like I totally am self-deceived. Like I thought I looked good, but like here I am even in comparing myself to others and recognizing that I definitely do not look as good as I thought. Um, but I think that something that I've had to come to terms with is that yes, it matters for me to assess how I view myself, recognizing that body image has a lot to do with what I think. But unless I'm actually willing to recognize the ways that body image in every way is formed by culture, it's formed by like the greater context in terms of people, in terms of relationships, then there's no way for me to actually heal my sense of body image. And so again, I think the way we talk about it can seem like it's just how I think,
Mm.
without actually recognizing that it is in every way influenced by what other people think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's talk about that because there's a lot that people say with in terms of you know just how we should look. I mean, I'll just get open with you, Patty. I resonate with your story, and maybe you could talk about it more. But I do think I've grown up really thin, and that's been it for me, and I've had to grow up. I'm pretty sure because I'm a man. People are like, "Why are you so thin?
Right.
Why is this? Why are you this way?"
Mm-hmm.
All my family members, my whole life, um, and it's always created this sense of like, well, I should be like swole, bro. I should be big. I
Yeah.
should be, and I really feel like that really dictated how I responded to that. Do you see that in culture? Do you see how people can be easily led? Are there any examples you have?
Yeah. So this was probably the time where I was like, you know what? Diet culture is so dumb because there's literally this standard that we've all been fed that is literally not attainable. And even if you were to get to it, it's always changing. And
Mm,
I think an example of that is I was sitting with two friends of mine who in my mind had like the body type that I personally would pursue. And particularly in thinking about like the abdomen area, I was like, they have such flat stomachs. I personally have never, even like genetically, I don't think we'll ever have abs. Like that's just not like, which is
mm,
fine. Anyways, there's so much nuance even to that. But I remember hearing the way that they were talking about themselves and were literally gripping skin, like not even fat, like just skin, and were criticizing the presence of skin on their like skin
mm,
that folds basically.
mhm,
And I remember just looking at them and just feeling like, wow, it just never gets better. Like there's never a time where you're actually secure. And I think that's part of this greater issue is again, wherever you are, there will always be a reason why you're in need of something to change or in need of something to purchase or whatever. Again, like it's so hilarious. Well, it's not hilarious. It's so devastating that so many, even women of color, as an example, feel this pressure to be a completely different body type. Like the fact that
mm.
they're curvaceous, the fact that they have whatever. And now, even as you like, if you look on TikTok, like there's literally a million videos about how to have a larger butt. And you're just like, really? Like, you have women who feel like they need to completely alter their bodies.
Mm.
Meanwhile, others who are like skinny and have the body type that, people are trying to attain are now feeling like they have to alter their bodies. And it's just like, and even for men, and it's so interesting how different it is dialogue wise, but how the root is so the same, right? Where it's like skinniness for men is seen as negative, right? Like what body type is praised is definitely not like thinness. It's like
Mm.
largeness. I don't know if that's the
Yeah,
correct
yeah,
word, but I think it's just hard because if you talk to any person who you would assume would be confident in what their body looks like
yeah.
because they look a certain way, most people that you talk to have so much insecurity.
And yeah, that you touch a lot of good points. I think this is a good question for this. It's a low ball question, softball. I think you'll get it because I think you and your husband really proactive in this way. But it's a biased question too. Is shape healthy? Does shape equal being healthy?
Absolutely not.
Nice.
Absolutely not, period. That's all. um yeah, I think it's really important to ask why it's currently talked about that like certain shapes are seen as healthier over others.
Mm.
Um, and recognizing that like if you were to even take into account diversity, like there are a lot of like racial, cultural, ethnic groups that do not align with the current shape. And so it's like, are you saying that there's only one population genetically on the planet that's healthy?
Yeah.
Like that's actually a knock to God. Like
Mm.
to think about like even what God's created, I'm like to say actually you formed people in a way that's like defective, which to me is again like when you think about like you take a room of like 100 people and regardless of what they do they could all do the same diet, same exercise, same whatever, and look totally different. And so then again with that you then have to take a minute to like unravel, okay, but what is health? Because right now the way we talk about health is completely opposite to what health actually is. Like right now the way we talk about health has everything to do with what you see.
Mm.
But what's crazy is like I could have a health condition that nobody knows about, which would make me unhealthy. And
Mm.
yet, if I have a body type that is like praised as healthy, then people just what you just assume that I'm healthy, you know? Um, and so I think as far as like measurement for how we perceive health currently is like not in any way aligned with even the science of what health is measured by.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know if you noticed this. I noticed this, but with health and health discussions, even what you see on TikTok or Instagram or whatnot, it just seems like there's this diet. It works, for some people, but I think it's sometimes there's some traction built in trying to get other people to, you know, have this certain diet to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if follow me, but what if the body is, everybody's body's different, right? So they're not gonna like respond to every diet the same way.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Could you speak to that? Because I feel like that goes a lot. That happens a lot.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of people who are very like every person should eat this way. Like to me, it's the most ironic thing that we live in a time where people are saying that keto is the way and veganism is the way. Like it to me,
Mm.
it's so ironic that literally completely opposing diets are currently trending, super popular, fighting for recognition in terms of like what's best. And an example of that is thinking about a friend of mine who's had chronic health issues that she started actually doing the full keto, not like partial or not modified, like full red meat, no vegetables, no whatever type diet.
Mhm.
And she had a lot of her health issues resolved. Like a lot of the pain that she was in, a lot of the digestion issue, like all that stuff was resolved. Meanwhile, for myself, I'm someone who has um, really bad acid reflux. I have a dairy allergy.
Mm.
And so when I'm thinking about like what diet works best for me, it is definitely more plant-based than anything. Like I've limited my meat to a certain degree, dairy out, and even like some gluten. But it's just so funny how we can sit across at a table and eat like literally the opposite meals. But again, wouldn't it be so damaging if I was forced to eat like her or vice versa?
Mhm.
Like when you consider our actual health on an individual basis, you recognize that there's diversity both in size and diversity in how we eat or how we approach food. Um, and so it is interesting how there's a lot even diet wise where like as an example a celebrity could say like Gwyneth Paltrow is currently someone who's very controversial in supporting intermittent fasting type diet that is actually harmful on some levels. But what's interesting is she says it and nobody questions it. Like a lot of people are like, oh, if Gwen, she says it, then like, let's do it.
He's a celebrity. Yeah.
Right. Meanwhile, you have a lot of dietitians who are fighting to help people be aware of the harms of dieting, where we know that currently statistically, the failure rate for diets long term is 90% above, like closer to like 95, 97%. Where, and by fail, meaning if you're intentionally pursuing weight loss, people will often regain that weight and more, and not be able to sustain it. And so when we think about like the science about it, it's like not as effective as people are aware of. But then it's interesting because you have people who are putting out that kind of message and they're like, send me like 10 articles, or where's your research, or where's your data? And it's just so interesting, I think, like what information regarding diets are valued above others.
I think that's why I appreciate what you do with Jesus 82. There was a Instagram post you had, and you were kind of restating for new followers. It was in August of last year. You're restating what the page was all about,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned how it's not about bashing people who do a lot, align themselves with popular health trend, but instead, this quote has always stuck out to me. You said, "This is a page that seeks truth amidst the health fog." I love that because it is foggy for me. It's really foggy. I don't know what, like, I don't know who is the health expert anymore, and it's getting even harder with TikTokers. But that's a different question. But yeah, you see these. I think you notice them because I think you're a little farther along than a lot of us. So you see these false and often harmful views of health online. Um, I don't know. Just describe this quote unquote fog, and how do you think people can navigate through the fog?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think health culture right now is so muddied by multiple factors. Um, and I think the major factor is it's tied so closely with identity and appearance to
Mm,
where people are willing to do just about anything to look a certain way. And I think why that's hard is because, so I'll give you an example. So for myself, growing up as someone who's trying to love God, I'm, trying to honor God. There are a lot of things, even for myself, that I would do habit wise that I hid behind God to feed harmful behavior. So, for example, something that I would do was fast from sugar, trying to petition God about things. I'd fast from sugar. In my mind, I was like, it's for God. I'm trying to, it's part of my
mm,
worship. Meanwhile, I was trying to lose a few pounds. And so I thought sugar is the thing that I think I can cut to do that. And so let me find a spiritual way to make that, different. But what's so interesting is, I hear a lot of people who cut certain foods out of their diet in the name of health. But when we actually like break it down, it has everything to do not just with weight loss, but with looking a certain way.
mm,
And I think where my concern lies is that a lot of people make really detrimental compromises to attain that kind of weight loss. But again, it's interesting because it can feel like an untouchable topic because it's under the guise of health. And so people are like, how can I argue with that? Like, if it's for your health, then it's for your health.
mm,
Meanwhile, if you actually assess where people are at, like one of the leading causes for most diseases is stress, right? Like,
mm.
and yet a lot of people, even in their pursuit of health, aka weight loss, aka looking a certain way, will pursue that in a way that actually affects their health in a negative way in other areas of their life, right? Where a lot of people live in fear, a lot of people feel like they can't participate in normal everyday life events. A lot of people express like, I don't want pictures taken of me. I don't want to go to this party because I don't want to be surrounded by food that I feel out of control around. Like life in every way is disrupted for so many who approach health in the way that's like commonly talked about. And so it's just interesting because some of the things that I am trying to my best to like separate is health and vanity.
Mm.
Health, again, if I were to think about even for myself currently, like I'm at my highest weight, but I know that I'm at my healthiest right now. And so if I actually care about health, I have to honor that, right? I have to respect my body for where it is. But if I'm in the position where I'm trying to pursue vanity or pursue control, pursue acceptance from others, then I will easily undercut my health to get there, which would likely look like skipping meals, restricting what I eat, over exercising, all those different kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
And so it's funny how in both categories you can do very similar things like be thoughtful about what you eat or exercise or all those different things. Um, but when it comes to like the actual pursuit of vanity, which is very much like the fog of health, it often undercuts um, the actual product of what health should look like.
Wow, that's a good point. Like even when I think about um even right now, like I think, just as I shared earlier, I've been, I was thin my whole life, but only recently did I gain weight, COVID
Mm-hmm.
pounds. So I gained this weight and I experienced the fog as you describe it. It's the vanity. And I think I even noticed myself like I want to lose weight not for health's sake. I want to lose weight because I want to be swole, bro.
Yeah.
Be big, get muscles. But and that's the culture that I can kind of live around with men in particular. But it's about vanity. I never noticed that. Like you're so right. Like we kind of mix the two together and we wrap our confidence around it and our appearance and so much. And I think that's a huge part of like how diet culture, affects our beliefs about our
Mhm.
bodies. Um, and yeah, I think maybe it's I don't know if you agree, but maybe it's like we have to start with like why are we doing this? Why are we pursuing this? I don't know. Do you
Mhm.
have more to say, or do you agree?
Yeah, I totally. I think for most of my life, I approached food, working out, all those different things from a place of fear.
Mm,
Fear of not being accepted, fear of not being loved, fear of not being good enough, all those different things. And it's interesting because I probably love diversity in foods, exercise, all those different things more than I ever have. And and so it's interesting because I think some people can think like, well, if I change my why, then it means I'm just going to eat ice cream all day or I'm just going
mm,
to whatever. But I think what's interesting is God has actually designed our bodies to know what we need. Like, and I think a perfect example of that is, there are some times where I, have eaten too much of something and my body is like strongly craving things. Like currently, in my life, I don't think I've craved vegetables more than I ever have. And part
mm,
of that is because like I also allow for my body to have all sorts of things like carbs. Carbs are good. Like I'm very attuned with what my body needs because I'm not operating from a place of fear. And so I think when it comes to my why, it's interesting how like I'm taking care of myself in a way that I never thought I could because my why is not trying to control the perceptions of people of me. It's not trying to control what my body looks like. It's trying to like genuinely honor God and respect my body, whatever phase, whatever it looks like, and trusting that that's good enough. So like, even so, for example, something that I often have to watch is my relationship with exercise in particular, because I have a history of disordered exercise where I worked out for the wrong reasons, and it showed. Like, I'd work out and hurt myself, like injure myself, because I just never listened when my body said I'm done. And there's a difference between pushing yourself and pushing yourself, you know?
Mm.
And but even now, like, something that I did, because in COVID I had a lot of stuff going on, but I was like, okay, I need to start. I know my body needs to move because that's how it was designed. My body was designed to move in some way. And so I started doing Zumba,
Oh,
which was
nice.
like, but it was almost like the gateway, because I was like, I need to always fight for movement to be associated with joy, like for it to always be positive.
Mm.
And when it's negative, to stop, because movement is good. It's my perception of it that can go bad. But now, like, I love lifting. I love going on walks. I love exercising. I think that's part of why I feel so sad for those who are caught up in diet culture thing, is because it can remove and suck out the good from good things because it's not done for the right reasons.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that, what you just said. Are, just I think you notice this unhappiness sometimes that we can get ourselves involved in, which I
Mhm.
appreciate you because, I don't, before your like ministry and like research, I was like, I don't really know how to like help somebody with how they feel about their body or how they perceive it. Um, what other factors can really play into that? Like, um, what other like, cultural, things can really affect the ways that we view ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many factors. Trauma is a huge one. Like, again, a lot of people have had really traumatic experiences with their bodies, whether it was like things being done to them or just things that, again, have prompted them to seek control in their lives. And I think the control of self is probably like the easiest thing to do. I think family is huge. I feel like that's probably the biggest influence I've seen in terms of like people's immediate space, where it's like they grew up in a place where there was clear expectations from family as to what they're meant to look like, and very clear communication as to when they, don't follow suit.
Mm.
And so I think family is like huge, and part of it is painful because I know for myself, I grew up in an environment where, family played a huge role in shaping how I viewed myself, and not in a way that I recognize that they were so heavily influenced by diet culture in a way that they didn't see. And then that translated to how, what I saw even as a kid. But obviously social media is
Mm.
so huge. Like, most of who I follow, even on my GZ2 account or my personal account, are only things or people that help align with where I'm trying to go mentally.
Mm.
Because there's just so much junk on social media. I don't think people are aware of how much is altered on social media. I think like we are in an age of technology where it's you can alter a video, like you can literally appear taller, smaller waist, larger, like whatever. And there is this girl who I follow. She's really amazing at talking about these things, but she was sharing that there's this one app that alters videos and photos to, again, like change the dimensions of your body, and it's been downloaded like 60 million times. And it just is like
Wow.
crazy to me to think that, like, again, there's so much about social media that we accept as reality that is just not, period. And so I often tell people that, again, though we want to be the kind of people who like, we can handle it. You know, I can watch something and not be affected. Meanwhile, every study shows the complete opposite of that. And so I often tell people like, your output reflects your input. And so if your social media input is all the pages that trigger your insecurities or make you feel like you need to compare yourself to other people, whatever, that will just be how you live your life. And so those three to me are some of the major ones I've seen influence people.
Mm, that's good. I think that will help even me, like, just really be aware of, when we navigate in the world, like, wow, like these things are kind of flying at me, and
Mm-hmm.
taking notice of that. I wanted to do a little exercise with you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you like a little phrase,
Okay.
and you can respond to it. Um, just things that I've heard in the past or recently, even in the past, that people can, either they've internalized and they've, been insecure about it. Okay, so the first one, how would you respond to this? Man, I'm just feeling really fat right now. I feel like
Mm,
big. I
right.
just don't feel good.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like genuinely like the question I ask people is like, so what is actually wrong with fatness?
Mm,
Like literally, it can feel like fatness is like it's like propaganda of like that being like the bad thing. Um, and I feel like most people don't actually know. They've just been taught from a young age that fatness equals a lot of things like not being good enough,
mm,
unhealthy, gross, like all these different things. And it's painful to talk to people who are larger bodied and for them to express like, if it were possible for me to be thin, I would. Like, if there was
mm,
a way for me to be a different shape, I would, just for the sake of getting people off my back. Um, but again, like when I think about if I were to start a business where I'd want people to purchase items for the rest of their lives, I would need something that they'd be afraid of. I feel
mm,
like when it comes to like diet culture and the multi-billion dollar business that it is, like fatness definitely is the thing that people are most fearful of and will pay literally anything to avoid it. And so I think to me, I often ask people, like, so why is fatness bad?
mm.
And giving people space to like actually take that apart. Um, but I hear that often. And I often tell people, like, when I've said I feel fat, that's not what I mean. I mean, I don't feel good in how I
Mm,
look. I don't feel like I'm enough. I don't feel comfortable. Like it's everything but that. But fatness feels like the first thing and the easiest thing to attack or the first thing to
yeah.
like label. So, anyways, there's so much that can be said with that one,
Okay.
but it's something that I hear often. So,
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you for that. I'll give you, one more. Just a little blurb that I heard from somebody. Um, I have a, what did she say? I have a, I have a double chin now, and I don't like it, and I just want to hide it. That was kind of the feeling. But how would you respond?
yeah, I'm just like,
I could do it too, girls.
yeah. Again, like it's just so like it's just so unrealistic to expect for us to not have things that are on our bodies. I don't know, like
Mm,
um I think it just breaks my heart. And I wonder, it's so funny. Sometimes I wonder, like, God, I wonder why you put that there. Like what the like purpose of it is. But I also just feel like there's like all we see and thinking about things like that is pictures, right? Like where there are literally ways for me to like alter how I look to where I don't actually have a double chin. But most people, this is why I love this like practice is like you can take a picture, right? You have like non-double chin,
Mhm.
and then take a picture of you looking at the picture. And it's often like this. And so it's just funny how like we just have this pressure of looking perfect, flawless. Though this is not a flaw, having a double chin is not in any way a flaw. But we just have this expectation that every angle of ourselves should look this particular way. And we have so much discomfort with not. And part of that is because our value as people are so closely tied with our physical appearance. So if
Mm.
I have a double chin, I'm no longer attractive. If I'm not attractive, then and then you go down that line of thinking, right? And so I think part of it is like, but where does the value come from in not having a double chin? Like, what do I gain as a person with not having fat in this little area? Uh,
Mm.
and so again, I'm like, even in that small sentence for both of them, there's so much behind that. Like,
Mm.
there's so much that we've been taught just in society about what is acceptable and what's not. And the way we regurgitate things, I think, to me, speaks to how affected we are by diet culture.
Yeah, that's like proof of it too, like how we are affected by it by little comments like what I said. Um, yeah, I just want to ask you, that was really helpful exercise, by the way. I really feel like that will help a lot of people because I I think once they're on paper, like people can begin to expose like the lies, low key, like of
Mm-hmm.
what they're internalizing and how it destroys their confidence even as a Christian. Just in your own journey, I want to ask you, what like scriptures or like what piece of advice has really helped you?
Yeah. I'm amazed because I'm like, the Bible talks a lot about this stuff. And it obviously doesn't talk about it in the way we talk about it, because the way we talk about it currently is very cultural, it's very time specific. Again, if you search the history of how this topic has evolved, it's evolved so much even within the last 100 years. I can't imagine from the beginning. But something that I love studying out is even like the beginning, like literally the beginning, like in
Mm.
Genesis, and looking at how God created things and how much joy God had in creating us in his image. And the fact that, again, like literally on the first page of your Bible, the word image is spoken about in reference to our physical appearance. And so it's like, I think to me, I'm amazed because I'm like, okay, it's not that God doesn't care about our image. He just really cares who we're reflecting.
Mm.
And part of the issue is that we're constantly trying to reflect what society states as being acceptable versus going back to what God thinks. And I think, to me, I'm so amazed and grateful for the standard that God set um, in scripture, like even in thinking about like 1 Samuel 16:7, where it talks about, man looks at the outwardly appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And
Mm.
again, that scripture is not to say that the appearance doesn't matter, but it's just like a reminder of like, you look for the wrong things. Like,
Mm.
again, even in that story, right, where Samuel's looking for a person to lead these people and is like, again, I'm sure in their mind, they have a very clear picture of what that physically should look like. What's funny is it's like, it's not that the appearance doesn't matter, it's that you always are looking and attuned to the wrong things, or like in your mind, what's been shaped as good.
Mm.
That, like, even again, you go back to what God says, and it's like all these things have actually already been made good. Like, my body has already been deemed as good, and yet what our world keeps trying to take apart or make us work for is to earn that goodness, versus recognizing that I already live in it. Like I already live in the
Mm.
state of being good, and how the world always keeps trying to take that apart or sell me things that I can like quote unquote achieve it. And so I think I'm grateful for the ways that the scriptures have reoriented my brain in recognizing that my filter or the things that I look for when it comes to image just don't align with what God sees as good. And so again, not not being in a place where I just suddenly don't care, because that's not what it's saying, but I think
Mm.
caring about what God cares most about.
Mm. Crucial. I just to add on, that's cool. Like you had this series, it really stuck out to me, and it was the What God Sees series. It was
Mm,
last year in August. So I was looking, I went through all the videos, and you have this amazing analogy, and you're building on truth. A video. It was between Solomon's temple and our
mhm.
body, which is a temple, like given the New Testament, First Corinthians. Um, that Solomon was like he was building the temple, and he was so intricate in his design and how many people, the measurements and where this should be, where that should be. And this was a long time coming back then because David was supposed to build it, but Solomon, took charge. And then you made this analogy where it was like, well, God is like that intricately involved in the details, like your body.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's why we should value our body because it's detailed by God.
Yeah.
That's Patty's wisdom. That's not me, but I think that's a bar right there. So I really appreciate you saying that because the smallest details, like God cares, but ultimately, like you were saying, like it's about where our heart is and our focus. So,
I think what I've found problematic is the way that we can use scriptures. Like even with the scripture, like I hear often people, and I use this. I like again, I'm someone who, at any point where I say this is problematic that these people say things like these things, I was one of those people. So I like
mm,
fully take responsibility for that. But even using that scripture, body being a temple, and even to what you were just saying, it's just funny how yes, that is true, but it doesn't mean that we're now the architect of that building. Like
mm,
God actually is the architect, and I'm just the one who's taking care of it. Like I'm not the one who has been entrusted with the dimensions of it. I'm just the one who's been entrusted to maintain it. And I don't mean maintain it in a weight way. I mean maintain it in a like taking care of it, like
mm,
having someone watch over it. And
mm.
yet how it's funny how like a lot of people with I don't think with bad intentions will use scriptures like that as a way to reinforce unhealthy ways of thinking rather than like letting the scripture actually speak for itself, and affect the way that we then approach our bodies.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's like the conflation of the two. When we become the architect, we start to make our own grounds for what we should look like and what, where our value comes from. I like
Right.
this quote you had. It was in your body image through a biblical lens. It was like a Instagram live you did. And you said, what can be seen as taking care of God's temple looks like worshiping a whole other temple.
Mm,
Um, different context for those, but I feel like they're connected thoughts where it's like we can feel like we're worshiping, we feel like we're worshiping God, but we're actually worshiping this other, body image that if we have it, then boom, like we're gonna get it and we're fine. We're gonna feel confident and feel good about ourselves. Um,
right.
but yeah, that's a quote I've taken from you.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I appreciate your, just a discussion, Patty. Just to end us off, what would you, I don't know, what are some affirmations that you would give to somebody who is really, maybe hasn't like really been aware, or maybe even is listening to this right now and they're like, wow, I feel like I've been saying that. Well, I feel
Mhm.
like, wow, like, what they said, like that rings true for me. Like what would you affirm them in, or how would you, what would you say?
Yeah. I just think that there's a huge need for self-compassion in this kind of topic, because even thinking about my own journey, I know that I made a lot of mistakes and have, stated a lot of false truths to people and have taught people really wrong things about health in the past, and have spoken to myself in ways that did not honor God. And so in my mind, I'm like, I've been there, and I'm just, I think, grateful for God's perfect timing. And that there's some times where I think like, man, why couldn't I have just known these things sooner?
Mm.
Why didn't Noah talk to me about this before? Or why didn't my friend, whatever, like all those different things. But I think recognizing that God is good with his timing, and that there's so much room for growth and grace. And that if you are in a place where you're seeing these things for the first time, to also just understand that it's not an easy journey. And so the best thing you can do is to be patient with God and patient with how he's working on us, and know that, part of my job now is to just make space for God rather than like change my mindset about things, because I'm like, that's totally like something that God can only do. And so, yeah, I think to be in a place where you're, um, being as kind and gentle in a very vulnerable space, where I think approaching this journey is just not easy. And so to just, yeah, be be gentle as you start figuring out where that comes from.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's really good. Thank you for saying that. Just lastly, sorry, I know I said the last question, but um, the what would you say to someone who's trying to help somebody else with these kind of internalized things that we can fall into?
I would just be, depending on where you're at, like cautious with, it's not about giving advice, but like cautious, especially if you're in a place where you don't know a lot. Like I even still, I feel cautious because I'm like, I'm not I'm a professional, like clinician wise, but like with this, like I'm still learning a lot.
Mm.
I think one of the things that I've shared with a lot of people who have come to me, expressing, hey, I have a friend who's in a tough spot. I don't know how to help them. I want to be there for them, but I also don't want to push them if they're not ready. And I think I always tell people what Noah did for me. And I think what was the most helpful is not like telling me, like, you should do this, or, more advice oriented thing, but really expressing concern, where it's like, hey, I'm just worried about you. Like, these are
Mm.
my observations. This is what I've seen. And I just am concerned for your well being. And I think approaching it from that heart of, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, or I'm not trying to prescribe you with a solution. I just want to extend care and concern. Because I know for myself, it's not that I hadn't ever heard before that maybe what I was doing was wrong, but and so it wasn't like that was the first time when Noah said it to me. But I think what hit home was seeing someone who really cares about me actually
Mm.
be fearful for my well being. So I think the more you can ask questions, the more that you can seek to understand, and the more that you can like legitimately convey worry or concern for someone, I think the easier that's received, because it is a real, I mean, it's our identity, right? Like it hits
Mm.
at probably some of the more vulnerable parts of ourselves. So I think to extend that kind of invitation, to me, it feels like the most effective way to reach people.
Mm. Sending that invitation, that's a good imagery of that. Like just leaving it open too. Like if you want, I'm here. I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, Patty, wow, thank you so much. You gave a lot, and a lot for, our listeners to chew on, even for me. as my body is changing, honestly, and experiencing this change. So thank you for your Jesus 82 ministry. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much for having me. I'm so grateful I got to chat with you today.
People can just you just have an Instagram, right? At Jesus 82.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, check out for everybody listening, check out Patty's page. There's so much more. We've just scratched the surface, but ultimately, examine your motivations. I feel like I learned from Patty. Examine them. Be careful about the things that are thrown at you. Maybe some of the things that you've internalized, and maybe we can start to, fight these things, and fight them in our society right now. So thank you guys for listening. This is the Logos podcast. Thank you so much for listening again. I hope that this was really fruitful and engaging for you. And thank you, Patty.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Bye.